Imagine the cobblestone streets of a plague-ridden medieval city. The air is heavy, thick with the stench of sickness and fear. Bells toll slowly in the distance as carts piled high with the dead creak their way toward hastily dug pits. People whisper about God's wrath, about curses, about punishment. And then, from around the corner, you see it. A figure draped head to toe in dark waxed robes that glisten under weak sunlight. A wide-brimmed black hat casts deep shadows over their face, but you still notice the mask. The long, curved beak, the hollow, unblinking glass eyes. The way the figure seems more like a walking omen than a doctor. These were the plague doctors, and seeing one approach your street was enough to make your blood run cold. They weren't just healers, they were harbingers. Their presence meant death was already here, or would be soon. But why the bird mask? The secret, strangely enough, lies in a blend of fear, science, and superstition. Medieval medicine believed in something called the miasma theory. The idea that diseases spread through bad air, an invisible poisonous fog carrying death from one person to the next. And so the mask's beak wasn't for intimidation. It was a filter. Doctors stuffed it with fragrant herbs, flowers, spices, even vinegar-soaked cloth, rosemary, mint, cloves, anything strong enough to purify the air before it reached their lungs. At least that was the idea. The reality, none of it worked. But people didn't know that yet. To the terrified citizens, these masked figures looked like beings half human, half spectral, straddling the line between life and death. And with their long canes, leather gloves and silent movements, they almost seemed not of this world. And yet, there's something about these doctors that history books rarely mention. Something about who they really were, and why the outfit was never truly designed to save lives. Because the most unsettling secret isn't what they wore, it's why they wore it. Section 2. Inside the mask. Imagine slipping one of those beaked masks over your face. The leather creaks as you tighten the straps. The glass lenses fog faintly with each nervous breath. And then, silence. The sounds of the plague-ridden streets outside become muffled, like you've stepped into another world entirely. But here's the thing. These masks weren't made to protect you from the plague the way a modern mask would. They were designed based on hope and fear, not actual science. Doctors believed the beak created a pocket of clean air, purified by the herbs packed tightly inside. Lavender, rosemary, cloves, myrrh, even crushed garlic. Some physicians even dripped vinegar on sponges to create an antiseptic mist inside the mask. Sounds clever, right? Except there was one problem. It didn't work. The bubonic plague wasn't spread by bad air. It was carried by fleas living on rats, moving invisibly from person to person, house to house, city to city. No mask could stop it, but no one knew that at the time, so the mask became the closest thing to protection they had. To make matters worse, the entire outfit was designed less for safety and more for show. The dark waxed robes weren't just practical for repelling bodily fluids, they were theatrical. Combined with the beaked mask and wide-brimmed hat, the doctor became a walking symbol of authority. In the chaos of a dying city, their appearance alone could part a crowd, and yet the people didn't trust them. To ordinary citizens, these figures looked like omens, not healers. Some even believed the doctors brought the disease with them, carrying death from one neighborhood to another. But what if I told you many of these so-called doctors weren't trained at all? Because the plague mask wasn't just hiding their faces, it was hiding a much darker truth about who was wearing it and why. Section 3. The truth behind the doctors. Here's the unsettling part. Many of the people wearing these masks weren't doctors at all. When the plague swept through Europe, trained physicians were in short supply, and many who could afford to simply fled the cities. That left towns scrambling to hire anyone willing to face the horrors of disease, death, and despair. These substitutes were called plague doctors, but that title was often more for show than skill. Some were barbers, others were failed medics. A few were straight-up volunteers desperate for steady pay. And yes, there were plenty who were just gamblers hoping they wouldn't get sick. It gets darker. Most plague doctors weren't hired to save lives. Their real job was bookkeeping. They counted bodies, recorded wills, and tracked the spread of infection from house to house. The mask and robe made them look powerful, but in reality, they were more like government clerks walking straight into death. And the irony, cities hired them not to heal, but to manage panic. The beaked mask, the heavy robes, the cane, it all sent a message. Don't worry. We're in control. But the public saw something different. To frightened families, these silent figures didn't look like saviors. They looked like harbingers of death. Whispers spread that plague doctors were cursed, that if one walked past your home, it was already too late. Some accounts even suggest townsfolk would attack them, convinced the doctors carried the plague on purpose. Imagine walking into a street full of terrified, starving people, and instead of helping you, they chase you away like a demon. And yet, people kept taking the job, because the pay was high, the risk even higher. But here's where it gets worse. That iconic beak, the part everyone remembers, wasn't just about protection or intimidation. It had a hidden purpose, and what they stuffed inside it tells us everything about medieval medicine. Section 4, the secrets inside the beak. Let's talk about the beak. That long curved mask is one of the most iconic images from medieval Europe. But here's the surprising part. It wasn't designed for style. It was designed for survival. Or at least, what they thought survival looked like. See, back in the 1600s, doctors believed diseases spread through something called miasma, bad air. They thought the plague traveled in invisible clouds of poison drifting through the streets. So the longer the beak, the further the bad air had to travel before reaching their noses. Inside those beaks, plague doctors stuffed a strange mix of herbs, spices, and other protective ingredients. Things like lavender and mint to cleanse the air, cinnamon and cloves believed to repel sickness, and occasionally vinegar-soaked sponges to filter toxic vapors. Some doctors even carried ambergris, an expensive substance from Wales, thinking its smell could ward off disease. The result? Whenever a plague doctor walked by, you'd catch this bizarre, overpowering scent of spices and vinegar long before you saw them. For terrified townsfolk, it made these figures seem less human, almost supernatural. But here's the twist. The mask didn't actually protect them from the plague. The bacteria wasn't airborne, it spread through fleas and close contact. The beak might have made them feel safe, but in reality, it was a medieval placebo. And yet, that's exactly why the beak became such a powerful symbol. The more elaborate and strange the mask looked, the more confident people felt that their city was handling the outbreak. But there's one more layer to this story, and it's the most disturbing part. Because wearing the beak wasn't just about protection, it was about power. And what these doctors could do under that mask would shock even modern audiences. Section 5. Power behind the mask. By now you know the beak, the robes and the cane weren't just about medicine, they were about status. Plague doctors, whether trained or not, often had extraordinary power. Cities hired them under special contracts that granted privileges most commoners could only dream of. They could move freely between quarantined houses, examine bodies, and even take possession of valuables from the dead, all under the guise of medical duty. And here's the unsettling part. They weren't always trusted. In fact, Many people feared them more than the plague itself. Imagine it. These silent, masked figures wandering narrow streets, knocking on doors, and leaving chalk marks to indicate sickness or death inside. If they marked your door, neighbors would avoid you. Families would sometimes hide illness just to keep a doctor from coming near. Even worse, some plague doctors abused their authority. There are records of them extorting families, stealing belongings, and spreading panic with rumors of death tolls far higher than reality. The mask became a symbol of dread, not just of disease.